Hi there, Professor. We're Team Michelle's Mob. On our team, we have Min, Nupur, Michelle, Janet, and Chintan. We will be discussing our analysis of Inditex's fast fashion company ZARA in Spain at the end of 2001. And Min will start us off.
We'll first look at the macro environment. Demographic and cultural-wise, their consumers from different markets have different attributes and preferences. And talking about economic factors, the recession just started in early 2000, firstly in US, and which later on spread to some other markets. Technological trends are that there was a period of technology and internet boom, so more and more tech companies were there and more internet users. Talking about geopolitical events, there were more and more countries joined the European Union, which facilitated the trading within these members. And talk about legal and political, more and more countries joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which facilitated the international trading by lowering the import and export tax. Now let's look at the Porter's six forces. First of all, when we talk about the buyer's power, it is an important force that the bargaining ability of buyers who can choose to push down prices, not to buy products or switch to other retailers. So in the case of the fashion industry, buyer power is relatively large force, while closest shoppers are typically individuals with little to no direct bargaining power. They have many alternative locations to shop for a period and little incentive to stay with one particular company, giving them plenty of indirect bargaining power. Talking about the supplier power, in the fashion retail industry, supplier power is a relatively small and insignificant force. Most apparel companies source their products from third-world manufacturers who receive just a fraction of the profit. Suppliers have little control over the fashion industry, as unfortunately they are dispensable and can always be swept out. As a result, input prices for these industries are relatively low and will stay there until the global development gap closes up significantly. Now look at the competitive rivalry. The fashion industry is an interesting one when it comes to analyzing through the intensity of competitive rivalry. There are large numbers of retailers who sell very similar products, but there's also concept of brands, which allows some companies to sell apparel for very high rates. Nowadays, there is little innovation in this space, so the market is quickly becoming saturated with very similar products. In this sense, the fashion industry is a very difficult one to get into and is almost becoming a race to bottom, which is not good news for retailers. Looking at the threat of the new entries, as mentioned previously, there is little that is unique to bring to the table in this industry, so this force is also somewhat small. However, new entrants might find unique ways to popularize their own products, and such as build new brands through some clever use of social media or online marketing, etc. The fashion industry in this current state is high risk and high reward for new entrants. It is not really difficult to get into a foot in a door and copy others, but will the markets care for those products is still a question. Talking about the threat of substitution, fortunately, for those in the fashion and retail industry, there's little to substitute clothes with. I mean, people have to wear clothes, and this force is almost negligible. All substitution in the fashion industry is really just a competition. And when talking about the complements, back to then, I mean around 2001, most of the fast fashion companies, they were just focusing on their main business with the clothing, while for those accessories like shoes, jewelry, or hats, etc., was just a beginning. So they can just switch a little bit and focus more on in these areas. Now let's talk about the threats and opportunities. From labor cost is one of the first and greatest threats because the labor cost is one of the most important components in the cost structure for clothing industry. All manufacturers tries to lower their labor cost by sourcing from suppliers from third countries, charges a lower rate. But with the labor cost increasing in those third countries, there's more and more challenges and threat for the manufacturers as well. Second is the per capita spending. And it is not really shrinking, it is not lowering, but it just grows less and slower than the per capita income. So that means the relative market is shrinking, while this is often driven by the unit price drop. The third threat is the competition with the local brands, because local brands they have just a more local loyal customers, more mature local channels, and more understanding of the local trends. So they will just give a better service to their local clients. But despite of these threats, we also have some we also see some great opportunities for the retail clothing industry. First of all, it's an international expansion. So, especially in some emerging markets, which are growing really quickly, like some of the Asian countries, especially like India and China. Second is online market. We talked about that this is a period about technology and internet boom. So there were more and more internet users which are willing to just browse and also do their purchasing online. The third one is a partnership with famous designers. Nowadays, we know there are a lot of this kind of cooperation. Like, for example, for Uniqlo, they cooperated with Ines de la French and Le Maire, while for H&M, they cooperated with Marni, etc. But back to then, it was still not yet quite developed. Well, for these brands, they could just charge premium price to get more profit and have a better brand image through these corporations. And it is a win-win situation both for the brands and designers.
Hi, I'm Nupur, and I'm going to take over from where Min left off. I'm going to be talking about Zara's strategic diamond and various aspects around it. Starting with staging, so Zara had a relatively fast global expansion plan compared to its competitors. For example, as on 2001, Zara and Inditex operated in about 39 countries, whereas Gap had operated in only 6 countries. H&M had operations in about 14 countries. While Europe had historically dominated Zara's sourcing patterns, the recent establishment of 3 companies in Hong Kong for purposes of purchasing as well as trend spotting suggested that sourcing from Far East might expand substantially. Talking of arena, by the mid 1990s, Zara had become a clothing brand targeting young fashion conscious adults, particularly women between the ages of 18 and 34 from households with middle to high income. Zara maintained good long term relationships with its suppliers, which minimized formal contractual commitments. About 20 of such suppliers accounted for 70% of all external purchases. Moving on to vehicles. Production for Zara took place in small batches, with vertical integration into the manufacture of the most time sensitive items. Vertical integration helped reduce the bullwhip effect, the tendency for fluctuations in final demand to get amplified as and when they were transmitted back up the supply chain. Zara also made significant investments in installing a just in time system in these factories in cooperation with Toyota, one of the first experiments of its kind in Europe. As a result, employees had to learn how to use new machines and work in multifunctional teams. Moving on to differentiators, Zara had a short cycle time for manufacturing. They also created a sense of scarcity, which is buy now or you won't see this item later, which triggered more frequent store visits as compared to competitors. Variety of options for different segments, and of course, it was the most fashionable within the fast fashion industry. Finally, putting everything together and speaking of economic logic, we can say that Zara improved operating efficiency by investing in manufacturing, logistics, and IT. Increased willingness to pay by manufacturing most fashion sensitive products internally. Customers were willing to pay more by having fashionable clothing that first came out every season. Zara also lowered costs by having short cycle times. Overall, Zara provided medium quality, fashionable clothing at affordable prices for the fashion conscious consumer.
Based on our previous analysis on strategy diamond, we would like to summarize ZARA's competitive advantage by identifying its cost drivers and value drivers. So first of all, just-in-time systems and short cycle time make it possible for ZARA to keep inventory at low level, which save the costs. And in addition, the case also pointed out that ZARA always starts with production in small batches and decided if it needs to increase production based on customer responses. Therefore, it would not spend money on unsatisfying design and clothes that doesn't find its popularity in the market, and was able to lower costs in the end. In terms of value drivers, it aimed at creating a sense of scarcity through small shipment and a degree of deliberate undersupply, which makes customers insensitive to the price level and were actually willing to pay more. And in addition, having quick responses to the market enabled ZARA to catch up the fashion quicker than its competitors. So for example, ZARA's cycle time, as the case pointed out, was less than 5 weeks, comparing to its competitors whose cycle times normally were up to 6 months. And ZARA manufactured most fashion-sensitive products internally, and those factors make customers were willing to pay premium price on clothing. And putting those factors into considerations, we believe that ZARA had relatively higher willingness to pay than Gap and lower costs than Gap. Therefore, it has more competitive advantage than its competitor Gap. We had several performance concerns for ZARA based on financial numbers in the year of 2001. First of all, ZARA and its parent company had less sales per square meter than Gap and Benetton, which indicated that its sales productivity was lower than its competitors. Furthermore, its asset turnover was less satisfying than Gap and H&M, implying that ZARA and its competitor Inditex does not utilize its long-term and short-term assets as efficiently as Gap and H&M.
Hi, it's Janet here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the VRI analysis for ZARA. In looking at ZARA's activities across the value chain, we have identified 9 main resources and capabilities. ZARA has invested money into internal manufacturing and production capabilities, as well as establishing vertical integration in a just-in-time system. The combination of these things allowed ZARA to achieve a much shorter cycle time than its competitors. It took only a mere 4 to 5 weeks for a new design and 2 weeks for modifications, all the way from initial conception to production. This allowed ZARA to commit to product lines much later than its competitors and achieve a quick response to fashion trends. These 4 resources and capabilities are all valuable, rare, not easily imitatable, and exploited by the organization. They are all critical to ZARA's success. ZARA also has an advanced telecommunication system that is valuable, however not rare, easily imitable, and not really exploited by the organization. ZARA could find better ways to exploit this potentially more valuable resource. ZARA also has a flat design organization that allows the company to better understand market trends in comparison to its competitors. It has resulted in an extremely low failure rate of 1% for their designs in comparison to the average 10% failure rate of designs in the industry. ZARA has established a centralized distribution system which eliminates the need for warehouses and keeps inventory low. This is a valuable resource for now. However, the case notes that as ZARA expands the centralized distribution center, it could instead create economies of scale. Therefore, it is arguable how valuable this source truly is. Next, ZARA has established a very strong brand name for itself, with particular strengths among women between ages of 18 and 34 from households with middle to middle high income. Lastly, we have ZARA's global presence. Currently, it has one of the largest global presences among its competition, but this is not a sustainable resource, as other companies are soon catching up. We've plotted ZARA's resources and capabilities on this 2x2 matrix. Because internal manufacturing, vertical integration, the just-in-time system, short cycle time, and strong brand name are all valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and already organization exploited. We have placed all of these in the upper right quadrant, as we believe they all contribute to the long-term victory of ZARA as a firm. We feel that the just-in-time system and short cycle time capabilities are the most crucial, and therefore they're placed in the upper rightmost corner. Next, we have the flat design organization that ZARA has implemented. We've determined that while this is a current advantage for ZARA, it is a relatively easily imitable structure. If other firms see the value in it, they can copy ZARA without incurring heavy immediate costs. Therefore, the flat design organization provides only short-term supremacy. Moving on to the bottom right quadrant, we have placed large global presence here. Although ZARA currently has one of the largest global presences among its competition, it's debatable how truly rare this is. Moreover, this resource does not really contribute to willingness to pay or reduce costs, and therefore is classified as providing long-term mediocrity. Next, we have the Advanced Telecommunications System. We believe that this is valuable but not rare, can be imitated, and is not currently organizationally exploited to its fullest extent. Therefore, this resource is fairly insignificant for ZARA. Lastly, we have the Centralized Distribution System, which we have classified as not valuable, as the case has mentioned that it may actually increase costs when it comes to scaling up, as it would have diseconomies of scale. However, a centralized distribution system is costly and hard to implement, and ZARA is currently exploiting it to their advantage. Therefore, we've placed this resource in the upper right-hand corner of this lower left quadrant. So, depending on how the system is adapted as ZARA scales in the future, it could move into another quadrant.
Udeshi, and I'll talk about strategy diamond changes. First of all, ZARA's parent company Inditex has a target of 20% year-over-year growth, and in order to achieve that, ZARA needs to increase its year-over-year growth by at least 15%. So we recommend ZARA to enter emerging markets in Asia such as China, India, and many other countries. While deciding which countries to penetrate into, we recommend ZARA to do pestle analysis, as in figure out which countries have which are politically stable, which have the target market which ZARA is looking for, which countries are fashion conscious and more tech savvy, so that it will be comparatively easy for ZARA to penetrate those markets. So in order to enter those emerging markets in Asia, we recommend we need to change few things in strategic diamond. First of all is arena, as I mentioned, enter new geographic location, and they might have to make some changes to the product category depending upon the fashion in their target market. And in terms of vehicle, work with strong local partners to facilitate low joint ventures, especially if ZARA doesn't have any presence in that particular country. In terms of staging, initially enter, so rather than penetrating aggressively, just enter the metropolitan area, which is more fashion conscious, and depending upon the feedback they receive from customers and what they learn from the customers, they can slowly or gradually enter new cities within that country. I'll talk about differentiators and economic logic in the next slide, and more or less we are just saying that ZARA should continue to use the same strategy for differentiators and economic logic. So here is the strategic diamond for expansion to Asia. So as I already mentioned, staging will remain so initially enter the metropolitan fashion conscious cities, and depending upon the feedback from the customers and what ZARA learns from the market, enter the other new cities within the same country slowly. In terms of arena, as I mentioned, enter new geographical location in Asia, which are emerging markets such as India and China, and change category depending upon the fashion trend in the target market as and when it is needed. In terms of vehicle, work with local partners and continue to use vertical integration, which will provide quick response. And we recommend ZARA to use Hong Kong distribution center, so that short time it takes to send products to the end customers will be comparatively less. In terms of economic logic and differentiators, we don't recommend many changes. For economic logic, we say continue to use the same strategy as an improve operating efficiency, lower cost to short, to reduce the cycle time and more fashion sensitive products. And in terms of differentiator, again use the same strategy as in short cycle time, so that they can uh, reduce the they can easily react to change in fashion trends. And this is why we recommend that distribution center should be Hong Kong for Asia market, so that it won't take much time to react to the market, and new products can be easily sent to the uh, end customers very quickly, and continue to create a sense of scarcity, so that customers buy the product right away, and provide different options for all the target markets, as in women, men and children. This way Zara would be able to achieve uh, 15% year over year growth, uh, provided it targets emerging markets where fashion trends are consistent with Zara's fashion taste basically. So that's it from now. Thank you so much on behalf of the entire team, and please email us if you have any questions.